My brother laughed, saying I couldn't even afford a car. Then a helicopter touched down on the front lawn. I stood up and said, "My ride's here." Mom dropped to the floor in shock. You know that feeling when your family just sees through you? Not in a loving, understanding way, but like they've already written your entire life story, and it's a total failure? For years I lived under that shadow, constantly being judged for my modest lifestyle while my siblings flaunted their traditional successes. But that day, the day they expected me to show up humble and defeated to our family intervention, I decided it was time to drop a bombshell, quite literally from the sky. I'm Allison, and at 32, I'd been dreading this family meeting for months. My older brother, James, 40, was the quintessential golden child. Ivy League, corporate executive, corner office in Manhattan, Hampton's vacation home. Then there was my younger sister, Stephanie, 28, who nailed the perfect life by marrying into old money, gracing local magazines, and filling her days with charity galas. And me? I was just Allison, the middle child, the odd one out. While they were busy chasing traditional markers of success, I was out questioning everything, building my first small business in high school, much to my parents' amusement. They called it a cute hobby that would eventually give way to a sensible career or marriage. When I announced I was skipping college to become an entrepreneur, the family reaction was brutal. My father, refusing to even look me in the eye, delivered the crushing blow. "You will regret this decision for the rest of your life." That was 10 years ago. I left our hometown of Cedar Springs with a mere $200 and a burning desire to prove them all wrong. My family predicted I'd be back within 6 months, humbled. When I didn't return, they simply manufactured their own narrative. I was struggling, too proud to admit it. My ventures had failed. I was barely scraping by in some tiny city apartment. Oh, if only they knew. In reality, my journey had been brutal. 2 failed startups, nearly bankrupt twice, ramen noodles for dinner more nights than I could count. But then, my tech security company hit gold with a patent that revolutionized data protection. 3 years of 18-hour days, and suddenly my company was valued at over $50 million. 6 months ago, a larger tech firm acquired us, making me wealthy beyond anything I'd ever dreamed. And yet, I kept every single detail from my family. Each holiday call, each rare visit home, I just quietly absorbed their assumptions. James would ask if I needed help with rent. Stephanie would offer her old designer clothes. I just politely thanked them and changed the subject. It was easier than trying to explain that I lived modestly by choice, that experiences mattered more to me than possessions, that I was funding schools in developing countries instead of buying mansions. Explaining would mean opening myself up to their judgment again, and I just couldn't bear it. Then came the call 3 weeks ago. Mom had fallen, broken her hip. Dad's early-stage dementia was accelerating. They needed more care than their savings could possibly cover. James, naturally, called the family meeting, his voice dripping with thinly veiled judgment as he asked if I could manage to come home and contribute whatever I could. My flight prepared to land near Cedar Springs, and anxiety churned in my gut. For so long I'd maintained an emotional distance, building a life with people who valued me, not my status. But family has this insidious way of shrinking you back to your childhood self. Would I finally reveal the truth? Or would I continue to protect myself from the shock, the awkward recalibration, the questions about why I'd kept it secret? As the plane touched down, I was still completely undecided. My parents needed help, and I'd already quietly arranged for the best care money could buy. But my siblings had no idea, and the thought of another meeting filled with their condescension tightened my grip on my deliberately average handbag. The morning of my flight, I stood in my downtown loft, carefully choosing the most understated clothes I owned. Faded jeans, a simple sweater with a small hole, worn sneakers. My assistant, Margot, watched me pack an old duffel bag, bewildered. "You're worth $50 million and you're dressed like a college student going home for the weekend," she observed, holding my usual sleek itinerary folder. "And you're taking a commercial flight instead of the company jet because this is how they expect me to arrive," I replied, tucking my hair into a simple ponytail. "They have a very specific image of who I am, and I'm not ready to disrupt that just yet." On the flight, I found myself wrestling with why I maintained this elaborate facade. Part of it was the sheer freedom of being underestimated. In business, it was a tactical advantage. People revealed more. With family, their low expectations meant I never had to justify my choices. But the deeper truth? Their judgment had hurt me profoundly. Their dismissals, their patronizing comments about my phase, the constant suggestions to settle down like Stephanie or get a real job like James. It all built into an impenetrable wall around my true self. I remember James's words from our last family Christmas 5 years ago. "Your problem, Allison, is that you've always been impractical. Some people are meant to lead and innovate. Others are meant to follow. There's no shame in accepting your limitations." That night, I'd stepped outside to hide my tears, pretending to take a call while I composed myself. The irony? Earlier that very day, I had closed a deal that expanded our company internationally. My team had celebrated with champagne. I flew home to be treated like the family disappointment. The taxi from the airport drove through the familiar streets of Cedar Springs. The hardware store, the ice cream shop, the park where I first dreamed of my business. Everything seemed smaller, preserved in amber, while my world had exploded beyond recognition. A pang of nostalgia mixed with apprehension hit me as we pulled up to my childhood home. The white two-story colonial with blue shutters, my mother's garden. For a moment, I was 10 years old again, running up those steps, desperately seeking approval. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal James, dressed immaculately even at home. "Finally," he said by way of greeting, checking his expensive watch. "We expected you hours ago. Did your flight get delayed, or did you have to take the bus from the airport?" His eyes, taking in my casual appearance, held a small, satisfied smirk. "Good to see you too, James," I replied, giving him a brief, stiff hug. "The flight was fine. How are Mom and Dad?" "As well as can be expected given the circumstances." He took my duffel bag, his expression a mix of pity and superiority. "I've been here since yesterday setting everything up. Stephanie and Andrew arrive tomorrow morning. You're in your old room, of course. Nothing has changed there." He continued without missing a beat. "You know, if you need any help with expenses while you're here, just let me know. I know taking time off must be difficult for you financially." And there it was. The first of what I knew would be many reminders of my perceived financial struggle. I could have corrected him, mentioned my executive team was handling my schedule. That money was the least of my concerns. Instead I just nodded, thanking him politely, playing the role they'd assigned me. Dad was dozing in his recliner, Mom in the kitchen, her movements slow but her eyes bright. "Allison, sweetheart," she said, reaching for a hug. "You look." She paused, searching for something positive about my deliberately downplayed appearance. "Healthy. Are you eating enough on your budget? You know, you can always call if you need help with groceries." "I'm fine, Mom," I assured her, helping her to a chair. "Tell me about your recovery." As we talked, James hovered, interjecting with medical terms and care options he'd researched. He'd compiled a binder of facilities, costs, ratings, all impressive, but with the unspoken assumption that he would make the decisions, with minimal input from me, the struggling middle child. "We'll go through everything in detail at the meeting tomorrow," he said, closing the binder. "But I wanted you to have time to process the realities of the situation. The quality care they need is not inexpensive." His emphasis on cost was deliberate, a subtle jab. I nodded thoughtfully, knowing my offshore account already held more than enough to provide my parents with the best care for the rest of their lives, with plenty left over. But tonight wasn't the time for revelations. I needed to understand the full extent of their attitudes. That evening, Mom insisted on making dinner. I offered to cook, but James had already arranged for a meal delivery. A proper dinner, he implied, unlike anything I might prepare. The spread was impressive. Roasted chicken, garlic mashed potatoes, artisan bread. "This must have cost a fortune," Mom exclaimed. "James, you're always so generous." "It's nothing, Mom," he replied, practiced modesty in his voice. "The firm had an excellent quarter. Besides, we should enjoy these family moments." Just then the doorbell rang. Stephanie burst in, her husband Andrew trailing behind, laden with designer shopping bags. My sister, perfectly styled, looked like she'd stepped off a fashion magazine cover. "We're here," she announced, carefully embracing Mom. "And we brought gifts." She distributed expensive scotch for Dad, a silk scarf for Mom, a leather portfolio for James. Then she turned to me, her smile faltering slightly. "And for you, Allison? I thought you could use this." She handed me a smaller bag containing a gift card to a mid-range clothing store. "I noticed last time you visited that your wardrobe could use some refreshing," she explained, with what she probably thought was sisterly concern. "This should help you get a few professional pieces for job interviews." "Thank you," I said, evenly pocketing the card, ignoring the implication that I needed employment help. "How thoughtful." "Well, we all want to see you succeed," she replied, patting my arm patronizingly. "Speaking of success, Andrew just made partner at his firm. We're celebrating by renovating the kitchen. Italian marble everywhere." Dinner conversation revolved around their triumphs. James's promotion, Stephanie's fundraising gala, Andrew's golf win. When the topic occasionally turned to me, it was always framed as gentle concern. "And what about you, Allison?" Stephanie asked, refilling her wine glass. "Any exciting developments in your... What is it you do again? Web design?" "Something like that," I replied vaguely, helping myself to more potatoes. "Small business solutions." "Still freelancing then?" James cut in. "I know a few people who might need basic websites. Nothing major, but it could provide some steady income. More reliable than gig work." "I appreciate that," I said, swallowing both my pride and the urge to mention that my gig work had recently been valued at $50 million. Dad, who'd been quiet, suddenly focused on me. "Are you still in that tiny apartment? The one with the noisy neighbors?" That apartment had been 5 years and 3 residences ago. I now owned a penthouse overlooking the city park, but they didn't need to know that yet. "I have a comfortable place," I answered truthfully. "Well, comfort is relative," Stephanie laughed. "Remember when Allison thought success meant making enough to buy name brand cereal instead of the generic stuff? As everyone chuckled at my apparent simplicity, the conversation inevitably turned to tomorrow's purpose, our parents' care needs. The reality is, James began, shifting into executive presentation mode, Mom and Dad need more support than Medicare will cover. Their retirement savings are substantial, but not infinite, especially considering the quality of care they deserve. We've been looking at several options, Stephanie added. There's a wonderful assisted living community near us, very exclusive, but we know the director. The medical amenities are top-notch, Andrew contributed, and the social environment would be perfect for them. Throughout this discussion, I noticed how seamlessly they used we, occasionally glancing my way with expressions that clearly excluded me from their collective decision-making. The message was loud and clear. They were the successful ones, handling the important decisions and financial arrangements. I was expected to contribute what little I could, and be grateful for their generosity in not demanding more. Of course, these premium facilities come with premium costs, James continued, directing this comment specifically to me. But Stephanie and I have discussed how we will handle the financial arrangements. We want to be fair about the contributions, Stephanie added with false sweetness. Everyone should contribute according to their means. Which means we don't expect you to match our contributions, James clarified, as if doing me a great favor. Whatever you can manage will be appreciated, even a token amount. My cheeks burned, not because I couldn't contribute, but because they had so completely written me off without ever asking about my actual situation. Years of assumptions had created a narrative about me that they accepted as absolute truth. You've always had so much potential, Allison, Mom sighed, patting my hand. I still don't understand why you never finished that business degree. You could have been so successful like your brother. Different paths work for different people, Mom, I replied quietly. Not everyone measures success the same way. True, James nodded condescendingly. But some measures of success are more tangible than others. Security, stability, the ability to care for family. These are universal indicators that one's choices have been sound. As the subtle digs continued, I maintained my composure, debating my next move. Part of me wanted to unleash everything, to see their faces when they realized how spectacularly wrong they'd been. But another part hesitated, wanting to understand the full extent of their blindness before changing our family dynamic forever. By the time dessert was served, I had made my decision. Tomorrow's family meeting would be the moment of truth. They were about to learn that their struggling middle child had been more successful than they could possibly imagine, just not in the ways they had prescribed. The official family meeting began promptly at 9 a.m. the next morning. James, ever the corporate man, had set up his laptop and a portable projector, displaying a meticulously prepared PowerPoint, parental care options and financial considerations. Stephanie and Andrew sat on the love seat, matching in their business casual attire, while our parents occupied their usual chairs. Took the wobbly ottoman in the corner, the least comfortable seat, perfectly fitting my assigned role as the family afterthought. I've compiled comprehensive research on the top care options in the region, James began, clicking through slides of upscale facilities with manicured grounds and elegant interiors. These three meet our criteria for quality medical care, social engagement, and proximity to family. Each option he presented was increasingly luxurious, with price points to match, detailing gourmet dining, cultural excursions, and specialized memory care programs for Dad. His preferred choice was a newly opened continuing care community, complete with separate apartments and a small golf course. This would allow Mom and Dad to maintain their autonomy while having immediate access to medical support, he explained. It looks wonderful, Mom murmured, though concern flickered in her eyes as Dad struggled to follow. Of course, premium care comes with premium costs. James transitioned to a slide with a detailed breakdown. The bottom line number caused Mom to gasp softly. This represents the gap between their retirement income and the actual costs. This is what we as a family need to address. Andrew, ever the finance professional, leaned forward. We've calculated how to distribute this responsibility equitably. Stephanie and I can cover 40%, and I can manage 45% through my bonus structure and investments. That leaves 15%, James added, which is approximately $1,200 monthly. All eyes turned to me. The unstated question hung heavy in the air. Could I even afford to contribute my relatively small share? I remained silent, curious how they would frame their assumptions. Stephanie cleared her throat delicately. Allison, we know your situation is different from ours. If that amount is prohibitive, perhaps you could contribute in other ways. Maybe visit more often to provide personal care instead. We don't want to create hardship, James added, with that patronizing tone reserved specially for me. Perhaps $500 monthly would be more manageable for your budget? Stephanie and I could adjust our contributions to cover the difference. How generous of you, I remarked quietly, noting how they had already decided what I could and could not afford without ever asking me directly. We just want what's best for Mom and Dad, Stephanie said, a hint of defensiveness in her voice. Those of us who can contribute more should do so. Dad, quiet until now, suddenly focused on me. Do you even have a steady job now, Allison? Last we talked, you were between projects. Before I could answer, James interjected. I've actually been meaning to discuss that. My company has an entry-level marketing position opening up. The salary would be modest by our standards, but for someone in Allison's position, it would provide stability and benefits. I could put in a word. That is so thoughtful. Stephanie beamed at our brother. A real job with a real company would make such a difference for you, Allison. The condescension was becoming unbearable. They had built such a complete narrative about my supposed failures that they couldn't even fathom I might have built something successful on my own terms. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I'm comfortable with my current professional situation. James exchanged a knowing look with Stephanie. Being comfortable and being secure are different things, Allison. At some point you need to think practically. You can't couch surf and do freelance work forever. Couch surf? I repeated, genuinely confused. Well, you mentioned having roommates last time we spoke, Stephanie said. And you never invite any of us to visit, which suggests your living situation might be temporary. I had never mentioned roommates. I had a house manager and personal assistant who sometimes stayed at my place. Hardly the same thing. And I never invited them because their judgment made visits unpleasant. I do not couch surf, I stated firmly. I have a stable living situation, but not stable enough to afford reliable transportation, right? James pressed. I noticed you took a taxi from the airport instead of driving yourself. Do you even own a car these days? The conversation had veered so far from reality, I almost wanted to laugh. Instead, I simply said, I have transportation arrangements that work for me. Allison has always been our free spirit, Mom interjected, clearly trying to smooth things over. Not everyone needs material success to be happy. That's a convenient philosophy when material success seems out of reach, James muttered, just loud enough for everyone to hear. That comment was the tipping point. 10 years of condescension, judgment, and dismissals crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. They were never going to see me clearly unless I forced them to confront their misconceptions. Let's get back to the main issue, Andrew suggested, oblivious to the tension. Can you manage the $500 per month, Allison? It's important we finalize the numbers today. I need to make a quick call first, I said, pulling out my phone. It'll just take a minute. Now is not really the time for personal calls, James said, irritation rising in his voice. We're in the middle of important family business. I ignored him and dialed Margot. Hey, it's me. Is everything set for today? I paused, listening. Perfect. Go ahead with the arrival in 15 minutes. Yes, the front lawn is big enough. Thanks. I ended the call and turned back to my confused family. Sorry about that. Just confirming my transportation. Did you arrange for another taxi? James asked with growing annoyance. We're not finished here. Not exactly a taxi, I replied, settling back into my seat. Now about those care options. I actually have another facility to suggest. It opened last year about 20 minutes from here. It has an exceptional memory care program and has been recognized nationally for its innovative approach. I researched every quality facility within 50 miles, James said dismissively. If it were worth considering, it would be in my presentation. This one is quite exclusive, I continued calmly. They only accept private clients through their foundation. No public listings. And how exactly would you know about an exclusive, unlisted care facility? Stephanie asked with a dismissive laugh. I smiled slightly. I know because I funded it. The Westbrook Senior Health Foundation is my project. A confused, echoing silence fell over the room. James recovered first. What do you mean your project? You can't possibly be suggesting you have the resources to fund a healthcare facility. That is exactly what I'm suggesting, I replied. This is ridiculous, he scoffed. Next, you'll tell us you own a yacht and a private island. No island, I said with a small smile. Not yet anyway. Allison, if this is your idea of a joke, it's not funny, Stephanie said sharply. We're trying to have a serious discussion about our parents' future. I assure you I am being completely serious, I replied, my voice bright. James laughed derisively. The same sister who can't even afford a car suddenly owns a healthcare foundation? Makes perfect sense. As if on cue, the distinctive thwack 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 of helicopter blades became audible, growing louder by the second. My family's conversation halted as the noise became impossible to ignore. What on earth? Mom exclaimed, moving toward the window. Outside, a sleek, black helicopter was descending onto their spacious front lawn, the downwash bending the grass and shaking the maple tree. Are they allowed to do that? Stephanie asked in alarm. Should we call someone? I calmly gathered my things and stood up. No need to call anyone. That would be for me. 5 pairs of eyes stared at me in complete confusion. What do you mean for you? James demanded. What is going on, Allison? I walked to the door and turned back to face my family. I believe your exact words were that I can't even afford a car, I said evenly. You were right. I don't own a car. I opened the door as the helicopter settled onto the lawn and its engines idled. The pilot, dressed in a crisp uniform, gave me a wave of recognition. My ride is here, I announced simply. My mother's face went pale, and she sank slowly onto the couch in a dead faint. My father stood frozen mouth agape. Stephanie clutched Andrew's arm so tightly her knuckles turned white, while James looked like someone had just told him the earth was flat. Before stepping out, I turned back one last time. When Mom wakes up, tell her I'll be back in an hour. I think we should continue this conversation at my new place. The helicopter can take all of us. As the helicopter lifted off with me inside, I caught a glimpse of my family still standing in the doorway, their expressions a mixture of shock, confusion, and utter disbelief. The pilot handed me a headset to block the noise, and I sank back into the leather seat, finally allowing myself to process what had just happened. "Everything all right, Miss Parker?" the pilot asked. "You seem tense." "Just family drama, Rick," I replied, watching my childhood home grow smaller below us. "You know how it goes." "Yes, ma'am. Should I circle around a few times to give them something to talk about?" he asked with a hint of humor. I laughed, feeling some of the tension dissipate. "Tempting, but let's head directly to the estate. We'll be bringing them all back with us shortly." The helicopter banked gently toward the wooded hills outside town where my newly purchased estate was located. I had bought the 30-acre property 6 months ago, a renovated historic mansion with 10 bedrooms and modern amenities. The grounds featured gardens, a small lake, and a newly built helipad. It was extravagant, yes, but also a long-term investment in reconnecting with my roots on my own terms. Below us, the sprawling main house with its stone facade came into view. It was beautiful, but also somewhat intimidating, which was precisely why I had hesitated to reveal its existence to my family. How could I explain that despite this outward display of wealth, I still valued simplicity and purpose over status? As we landed, Margot was waiting, tablet in hand. She'd been with me since the early days of my company, one of the few people who knew both my professional and personal worlds intimately. "How did the grand reveal go?" she asked, handing me a bottle of water. "About as expected," I replied dryly. "My mother fainted. The rest looked like they'd seen a ghost. We'll be bringing them here in about an hour, so please make sure everything is ready." "Already done," she assured me. "Chef Thomas has prepared lunch. The West Wing guest rooms are prepared in case they stay over. And I've assembled the family portfolio as you requested." That portfolio contained documentation of the care arrangements I'd already been quietly putting in place for my parents, the foundation I'd established, the trust fund to cover all their medical needs, the legal framework that would ensure they receive the best possible care, regardless of family dynamics. "Thank you, Margot. What would I do without you?" "Probably buy another tech company out of boredom," she quipped. "Speaking of which, the Tokyo team sent over the proposal for the new security protocol. They need your feedback by tomorrow." "I'll review it tonight," I promised. But family comes first today, complicated as that may be. An hour later, Rick radioed that he was approaching my parents' house. I took a deep breath, preparing for the next phase. Part of me regretted the dramatic helicopter entrance. But after years of dismissal, perhaps a dramatic gesture was exactly what was needed to break through their perceptions. When the helicopter returned, my entire family was aboard, their expressions still stunned. Mom clutched her purse like a shield. Dad gazed out the window in wonder. My siblings maintained a shocked silence that was entirely out of character. Only Andrew seemed to have somewhat recovered, his banker's mind likely already calculating the value of what he was seeing. As we landed and they disembarked, the full impact of the estate came into view. Stephanie's mouth literally dropped open. James kept blinking rapidly, as if trying to wake himself from a dream. "Welcome to my home," I said simply, leading them toward the main entrance where Margot waited with a professional smile. "This is yours," my mother finally managed to ask as we entered the soaring foyer with its grand staircase and crystal chandelier. "Yes, Mom. I purchased it 6 months ago when I decided to establish a regional office nearby." "Regional office of what?" James demanded, finding his voice at last. I led them into the main living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens and lake. "Of Parker Security Solutions. My company." I gestured for them to sit on the plush sofas. "Your company?" he repeated flatly. "Since when do you have a company? And how could you possibly afford all this?" "I founded PSS 8 years ago," I explained calmly. "We specialize in cybersecurity solutions for small to mid-sized businesses. 6 months ago, we were acquired by Nexus Technologies for just over $50 million. I retained leadership of the division and significant equity in the parent company." The silence that followed was deafening. Stephanie looked like she might follow Mom's example and faint. James had gone pale beneath his tan. $50 million? My father repeated slowly. "My Allison?" "Yes, Dad," I said gently, moving to sit beside him. "You're Allison." But you never said anything," my mother stammered. "All these years we thought. You thought I was struggling," I finished for her. "I know. I never corrected that assumption. Why would you let us believe you were barely getting by?" Stephanie demanded, finding her voice at last. "Do you know how worried we were about you?" I raised an eyebrow at her. Were you worried, Stephanie? Or was it more comfortable to believe I had failed? You gave me a gift card for job interview clothes yesterday. She had the grace to blush. I was trying to help. No, I said firmly. You were trying to reinforce the narrative that made sense to you, that the sister who chose a different path must necessarily be struggling. It never occurred to any of you that I might succeed on my own terms. You could have told us, James said, a hint of anger in his voice. Instead, you let us make fools of ourselves. I did not create your assumptions, I replied evenly. You did that all on your own. Every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject or dismissed it as, that computer thing Allison does. You never asked genuine questions about my business or my life. But the old clothes, the taxi from the airport, my mother, began, were choices, I finished. I lived simply by preference, not necessity. I drive a 10-year-old car when I drive at all because I prefer it. I took a taxi because I flew commercial to maintain my privacy a bit longer. None of that means I can't afford better. It means material displays are not how I measure success. Andrew, ever practical, spoke up for the first time. So that care facility you mentioned, the Westbrook Foundation, that really is yours? I nodded and gestured to Margot, who brought over the family portfolio. Yes. After my first major round of funding 3 years ago, I established the foundation. It operates an innovative care community specializing in memory support and holistic elder care. I had already arranged for Mom and Dad to have a place there whenever they need it. I opened the portfolio, showing them the documentation. The trust established in their names, the healthcare provisions, the legal framework that would protect their future regardless of any family disagreements. You did all this without telling us? James asked, his voice a mixture of awe and residual anger. I did all this because I love them, I corrected. And yes, without telling you because I knew what would happen. You would question my decisions. You wouldn't think I was worthy of having a say in our parents' care. Today's meeting confirmed exactly that. My mother wiped away tears. We never meant to make you feel that way, Allison. Perhaps not intentionally, I acknowledged. But every gift card for basic necessities, every offer of an entry-level job at James's company, every condescending remark about my potential sent the same message. That you believed I had failed and needed rescue. We were trying to help, Stephanie insisted. Were you? Or were you trying to validate your own choices by casting mine as the cautionary tale? The family screw-up who couldn't succeed without following your prescribed path. My words hung in the air, uncomfortable but true. For the first time, my siblings seemed to be genuinely reflecting on their behavior, rather than defending it. My father reached over and took my hand, his eyes clearer than they had been all weekend. I always knew you were special, Allison. Different, yes, but special. I just didn't understand what you were building. Thank you, Dad, I said softly, squeezing his hand. That means a lot. Margot discreetly signaled lunch was ready, and I invited everyone to the dining room. As we settled around the table, set with fine china and fresh flowers, the initial shock began to give way to curiosity. Mom wanted to know about my home in the city. Stephanie asked about my travels. Even James started asking more substantive questions about how I had built my company. For the first time in years, they were really seeing me, not as the failing middle child, but as a successful woman who had created something significant on her own terms. The helicopter had gotten their attention, but it was this moment of genuine interest in my life that felt like the true revelation. After lunch, I gave them a tour of the estate. As we walked the grounds, the initial tension gradually dissolved into a more complex mixture of emotions. Lingering embarrassment for my siblings, pride for my parents, and my own sense of relief at finally being authentic. In the garden, overlooking the lake, we settled onto patio furniture for coffee. When did you know your company would be successful? My father asked, his eyes more focused than they had been all weekend. Despite his cognitive challenges, his interest seemed to anchor him. There wasn't a single moment, I explained. We nearly went bankrupt twice in the first 3 years. I lived in a studio apartment with a leaking ceiling, worked 18-hour days. But the 3rd year, we patented a security protocol that changed everything. Why didn't you ask for help during those hard times? My mother wondered. We would have helped you. With conditions, I said gently. Every offer of help came with the expectation that I would admit my path was a mistake. I needed to prove to myself that it wasn't. James, uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. I owe you an apology, Allison. I made assumptions about your choices that said more about my own insecurities than your capabilities. His admission startled me. He rarely acknowledged being wrong. What do you mean your insecurities? I asked. He sighed, setting down his coffee cup. I followed the path that was expected of me. Ivy League, corporate ladder, country club membership. I did everything right, according to our family's definition of success. He paused, looking out over the lake. And I hate at least 60% of my daily life. James, my mother exclaimed. You never said anything. Because admitting dissatisfaction would mean admitting I might have chosen wrong, he explained. So when Allison chose a completely different path, I needed her to fail to validate my own choices. Her success challenges the narrative I built my life around. His honesty created an opening for Stephanie, who had been fidgeting with her wedding ring. I feel the same way, she admitted quietly. My life looks perfect on Instagram, but Andrew and I have been in couples counseling for the past year. All those charity galas and country club events feel empty sometimes. Andrew nodded in agreement, taking her hand. We've been reassessing what really matters to us. The big house and social status came with costs we didn't anticipate. This vulnerability from my siblings was unexpected and deeply moving. For years, I had imagined them perfectly content, judging me from positions of smug superiority. The reality that they too had doubts and regrets created a new possibility for authentic connection. Why did you keep your success secret for so long? My father asked. Were you punishing us for not believing in you? The question stung with its accuracy. Part of me had enjoyed the fantasy of a dramatic revelation that would force them to recognize how wrong they'd been. But the reality of seeing their shock and hurt was less satisfying than I'd imagined. Initially, I kept quiet because I wasn't sure the success would last, I admitted. Later, it became a habit, a form of protection. And yes, maybe there was an element of wanting to prove everyone wrong in a dramatic way. That was petty of me, and I regret it now. The helicopter entrance was a bit extra, Stephanie said with a small smile, using her favorite slang term. I laughed, acknowledging the truth. Not my most mature moment, I concede. But after James's comment about not even affording a car, something in me just snapped. I deserved that, he admitted, though Mom fainting was concerning. I was overwhelmed. Our mother defended herself. Finding out your daughter is a millionaire tends to come as a shock. Multimillionaire, Andrew corrected automatically, then looked embarrassed when we all turned to him. Sorry, banker habit. The conversation shifted to my parents' care, this time with me fully included. I explained the Westbrook Foundation's approach, particularly for dementia patients like my father. Rather than the institutional model James had researched, Westbrook offered a community of small, home-like residences with personalized care plans and an emphasis on maintaining dignity and independence. The foundation has already established a trust to cover all expenses, I explained, addressing the financial concerns that had dominated the earlier meeting. But this isn't about me taking control of the decisions. It's about all of us finding the best solution together as equals. Equals, James repeated thoughtfully. That's going to take some adjustment in my thinking. Mine too, I acknowledged. I've been defining myself in opposition to all of you for so long. I'm not sure I know how to be just a sister and daughter without that edge of resentment. As the afternoon progressed, we began rebuilding our family dynamic on this new foundation of honesty. The process was awkward at times, old habits reasserting themselves, but the willingness to try was evident on all sides. My parents watched their adult children with a mixture of concern and hope, occasionally contributing memories from our childhood that highlighted moments of connection we had forgotten. When evening approached, I invited everyone to stay over. Stephanie was clearly excited to experience the luxury accommodations. James seemed relieved not to have to process everything while driving back to the city. My parents were simply happy to have all their children under one roof, a rare occurrence. Over dinner, prepared by my personal chef, we continued building bridges. There were difficult moments. Stephanie's hurt over not being included in my real life, James's lingering defensiveness about his career choices, my parents' regret for not supporting my entrepreneurial path more fully. But there were also moments of genuine connection, and even laughter as we shared stories from our separate lives. So, you really flew to Tokyo for a day just to meet with investors? Stephanie asked incredulously. I can't imagine having that kind of freedom. It wasn't as glamorous as it sounds, I assured her. I was so jet-lagged, I put salt in my coffee instead of sugar, and nearly fell asleep during the presentation. Still, she sighed. Your life sounds exciting. Parts of it are, I acknowledged. Other parts are ordinary and sometimes lonely. Success created opportunities but also isolation. There are trade-offs to every choice. I think that's what I'm finally starting to understand, James said thoughtfully. There's no perfect path that guarantees happiness. We all just do our best with the choices we make. As we finished dinner and moved to the living room for dessert, I realized something profound had shifted. The hierarchies and judgments that had defined our relationships were not gone entirely, but they had been fundamentally disrupted. In their place was something tentative but promising. A more authentic connection based on who we really were. When my mother accidentally knocked over her coffee cup, staining the expensive carpet, her immediate distress revealed how much she still saw herself as a visitor in my world. I'm so sorry, she gasped. That rug probably costs more than our car. It's just a rug, Mom, I said gently. Things can be replaced. This conversation, this honest connection we're building, that's what matters. Later, as everyone retired, I stood on the terrace looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the lake. James joined me, offering a glass of whiskey from my collection. You've done well for yourself, little sister, he said with genuine admiration. Not just the money and all this, he gestured at the estate. But building something meaningful on your own terms, that takes courage. It's never too late to make changes, I told him. If you hate 40% of your life, that's actually not terrible odds, but you could aim higher. He laughed softly. Always the optimist. Some things never change. Some things shouldn't, I agreed, clinking my glass against his in a quiet toast to new beginnings. The next morning, sunshine streamed through the breakfast room as my family gathered around the table. Chef Thomas had outdone himself. The conversation flowed more naturally now, less tension, more genuine interest. I still can't believe you funded an entire care facility, my mother said, adding cream to her coffee. How did you even know what was needed? Research, I explained. After Dad's diagnosis, I dove into learning everything I could about progressive memory care. The traditional options seemed so institutional. I wanted to create something that preserved dignity and joy, not just safety. That's what impressed me most during yesterday's tour, James admitted. The attention to design details that support memory patients without looking clinical. The residents seemed genuinely happy. That was the goal, I nodded. When residents moved in, we interviewed their families about their life histories, preferences, even the small daily rituals that made them feel at home. The architecture and programs were built around those human needs, not just efficiency. Would it be possible for me to volunteer there sometimes? Stephanie asked hesitantly. My charity work has felt increasingly superficial lately. This seems like somewhere I could make a real difference. They would love that, I said, genuinely touched. They have an arts program that could use someone with your eye for design. The conversation shifted to practical matters. The timeline for our parents' move, the legal arrangements, how we would stay connected through the transition. For the first time, we were discussing these issues as equal partners, each contributing our different strengths. After breakfast, we moved to the garden for a family photo, the first in many years where the smiles felt genuine rather than performed. As we arranged ourselves, I reflected on how dramatically our family dynamic had changed in just 48 hours. Before you return home, there's something I want to share, I said once we were settled in the living room again. My success has been meaningful professionally, but it has come with personal costs. I'm only now beginning to address them. What do you mean, dear? My mother asked with concern. I've spent 10 years defining myself in opposition to this family, I explained. Working to prove you wrong became such a driving force that I sometimes lost sight of what I actually wanted for myself beyond that validation. Building walls to protect myself from judgment also kept me isolated from genuine connection. I think we all played a part in that dynamic, my father said with unexpected clarity. Family systems are complicated. Everyone contributes to the patterns. Exactly, I agreed, surprised and touched by his insight. Which is why healing needs to involve all of us. I'm planning to stay in this area part-time now, splitting my time between here and the city. I want us to rebuild our relationships, not based on who we thought each other was, but who we actually are. I would like that very much, my mother said, reaching for my hand. To get to know the real Allison, not just the version we imagined. And I want to know the real versions of all of you too, I added. Not just the roles we fell into over the years. James cleared his throat. Speaking of authentic selves, I've been thinking about making some changes. I've been offered a teaching position at the business school. Less money but more meaningful work. After seeing what you've built, Allison, I'm inspired to stop doing what's expected and start doing what matters. That sounds perfect for you, I said sincerely. You always were a natural teacher. Stephanie shared her own tentative plans for shifting her energy from status-driven galas to more hands-on community work, while Andrew mentioned his interest in ethical investment counseling for nonprofits. My parents listened with evident pride as their adult children spoke about aligning their lives more closely with their values. As the weekend drew to a close and preparations were made for everyone's departure, I felt a profound sense of peace. The helicopter that had caused such drama was now just one transportation option among many, no longer a symbol of division, but simply a convenient way to take my parents home. Will you come for Sunday dinner next week? My mother asked as we said our goodbyes. Nothing fancy, just family. I would love that, I replied, embracing her warmly. Just family sounds perfect. After everyone had gone, I walked through the quiet house, reflecting on the weekend's events. The revelation of my success had created an opening for something far more valuable than recognition or vindication, the possibility of authentic connection with the people who had known me longest. True wealth, I realized, was not measured in helicopter rides or estate homes, but in relationships where you could be fully yourself and still be loved. For years, I had pursued external success while keeping my heart protected behind walls of secrecy and resentment. The real challenge now was learning to be vulnerable, to risk being known fully by the people who had once misunderstood me so completely. As I settled on the terrace with my laptop, I felt lighter than I had in years. The complicated family dynamics weren't magically resolved, and there would undoubtedly be setbacks and old patterns reasserting themselves. But a fundamental shift had occurred, creating space for new possibilities. The sun was setting over the lake, casting golden light across the water. In that moment I felt immense gratitude, Not for the material success that had allowed me to make a dramatic entrance, but for the courage to finally be authentic with the people who mattered most. That was the true victory. Far more meaningful than proving anyone wrong.